After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6 and knight c3, the 3 knights game is on the board. Here black goes on with pawn to f5. This is called either Wiener or Gothic defense. Now, we're not going to go through white playing bishop to c4 or bishop to b5 because those will literally be transposition into Italian or Spanish games. Both of them we meet with the Russo or Schliemann Gambit. For more information, check out the playlists in my channel because f5 is one of the main moves that I recommend to play in many of the e4, e5 games. In this case, the Wiener defense is on the board. Let's go on. 3 main moves we're going to look at. One of them is pawn takes in f5. The other one is d4. The other one d3. Let's start with pawn takes in e5, which in this specific opening it's not really bad because you can't really push e4 since that square is attacked by the opponent knight. So black goes on with knight to f6 with the goal, of course, of playing pawn to e4. So now we're going to go through 2 moves, bishop c4 or bishop to b5. Now, this is not going to be a transposition into an Italian. The reason being very simple. If white plays the Italian game straight away, he will play f5. And if white actually does take the pawn, he will be running into e4 right away. So the game is different. And just because white played bishop c4, it doesn't mean it's going to be a perfect transposition into an Italian. We've got to know how to play this from this position. So bishop c4 comes now. Black plays d5 immediately. Now black controls the center. You're also aiming to take the pawn in f5. After bishop to b3, because the pawn in d5 is too well protected, e4 comes, attacking the knight. And now the game is already compromised for the white player. White will have to play queen e2, and now we're going into thematic situations that we already know. But first, let's look at this move. What happens after knight to h4, saving the knight, and also protecting the pawn in f5, preventing the development of this bishop. This now begins a crazy line. d4 comes now, attacking the knight. The knight could go to b5 or b1, where a4 is not possible because b5 will trap it. The bishop is guarding c5. So let's look at both of them. Knight to b1, and things are getting nasty. Black wins the knight with g5 straight away. The white knight is trapped, can't go anywhere. The only move available for white will be taking en passant. And now black takes g6. This line is getting crazier by the second. Black has no care for the safety of the king, for a piece, for material, just for nothing. The only thing that matters is, if you like this channel, the bishop pair and development. Nothing else matters more than that. Knight to g6 now, threatening to simply win the rook or swap with the bishop and keep going with the material. It's too late. Black wins the game right now with this unbelievable move. d3. Boom! Black is now going to play this move, bishop to g4, winning a lot of material. So if white takes the rook, for example, black plays bishop to g4, trapping the queen. So you're going to win because of that. It looks like there's 2 pawns that could potentially reach f3. So what happens after f3? This doesn't help, because you're just going to take. And after pawn takes back, looks like the white queen will now not be trapped and taken. But black wins after queen e7 check. Only move will be either king f2 or king f1. Let's try king f2 to get the rook to play. Well, king f1, you will just play bishop h3 check. It doesn't look any good for white. Either way, let's say king to f2, knight e4 check. The pawn can't take the knight because then you will be still winning the queen. If the king tries to run away, king to g2, bishop h3, another sacrifice, boom. And after the king takes, knight f2 check, king goes back, take the queen, and you're going to win loads of material. You're also going to recapture this knight. You're going to be able to castle alongside. The rook can't really recapture the knight because queen e2 will make the white player feel too emotionally violated. And in this position, after the knight check, king to g1 wouldn't have saved the white king from the check of the bishop and the following attack, because queen to c5 is literally mate next move. g2 or f1, doesn't matter, you're going to checkmate. So from the start, things don't get any better. The other move, knight to b5. So f5, and when the pawn gets taken, knight to f6, because we can't push e4 right away. So we're going into the Pseudo-Italian variation. So okay, d5, bishop to b3, and now we attack the knight. And after knight to h4, protecting the pawn in f5, d4. Earlier we went to knight b1. What happens after knight b5? Okay, we kick the knight away, straight away. Only move is knight to a3. And now d3, thematic. This is such a beautiful move because it breaks white forever, right? Let's say white takes the pawn. Okay, take back with the pawn. This knight in h4 is always going to be under threat. This is just looking ugly. White can't even castle in peace because bishop takes knight, pawn takes back, we're up a piece, and now queen to d4 attacks the rook and the knight, wins material. And in this position after d3, if white tries to castle right away, how do we exploit this in our favor? We play g5, so it's thematic. The knight is trapped. The only thing to do will be to take en passant, and then we take back. And it's crazy because the knight can take in g6 with an attack on this rook, on this bishop, and it looks like you don't have any attack. But now black simply plays rook to h6, attacking the knight. Now you may argue that the knight can take the bishop and win on material, but the position has been evaluated -5 for a while. So if white takes the bishop, okay, then queen to d6, threatening checkmate after g3, knight to d4, going to f3 or e2, the bishop is going to h3. You can recapture the knight anytime you want, but possibly you will even just ignore and develop the rook by castling alongside. This knight or this bishop, they cannot make any type of threat. -5 on the engine. So let's maybe have a look at another move you might have thought about. Here, after rook h6, what happens after f4? Maybe potentially playing f5 and allow the white player to play maybe knight f4, go back. Okay, well, this loses immediately. Queen to d4 check. And either way, either the rook blocks or the king moves. Knight to g4 comes anyway, threatening to win so much material. You're also threatening mate with rook h2, which means white will be forced to take the knight with the queen and give up so much material. So from the start, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3. Okay, f5. And after pawn takes, knight to f6. And after bishop c4, d5, bishop to b3, e4. What happens after queen e2, pinning the pawn? Okay, bishop to b7, I'm pinning it. Now we're threatening to win the knight. And there's nothing really good here. Let's say knight to g5, you just play knight to d4, you're going to win the bishop pair. The queen will have to go to d1, only move, and now you just take the pawn in f5 with development. And from this position, let's just look at two options. Let's say white plays knight to e2 to challenge this incredible knight. How do we deal with this? We pin it, bishop to g4, and we're winning this game already. It's game over. Two minor pieces attacking that knight. No way to stop it. f3 doesn't help because you can just take. You can't take the knight in d4 because you will take the pawn in g2 with an attack on the queen, whilst the pawn threatens to win the rook and promotion. In this position, what happens after d3? Very normal looking move. Okay, bishop to g4. The queen can't really move anywhere. That makes sense. If pawn to f3, you take, and after the knight takes back, this looks like maybe it will become a normal game, but in reality, it's compromised. Bishop to c5 comes now. White can't give us any checks. This bishop is ready to become a monster, so white can't really castle because the moment he castles, he'll end up in check. When you discover check of the knight will be tremendous. Let's look at three options from this moment. Knight to a4, attacking the bishop, simply met with queen e7 check. And after king to f1, knight takes. The queen can't take back because of the bishop, so after pawn takes back, this should be it. And in this position, if white simply attacks the bishop in h3, you just take the knight. And after the pawn takes back, castle. White's kingside is completely devastated. There's no coming back from this. White's best move would be king to d2, crazy enough. Black's best is king to h8. We want to be able to move this pawn at some point. And after queen to f1, playing the best moves, the queen now joining the game. Knight to e4 comes now. What an unbelievable move. That's check. The pawn can't take because rook will take queen. So after pawn takes, how do we deal with this? Pawn takes back, and you have all the threats of the world. Position is completely over. Game is completely won for black. You can literally have fun now. And in this position, even if bishop to g5, how to face that? Queen d6, I'm pinning the knight. If bishop takes the knight, when first we take the knight with an attack on the queen, after the pawn takes back, we take in f6 with the queen, we're going to win the endgame because of so many threats we're making, much better position and pawn structure. And in this position, after queen to d6 move, if white attacks our bishop, just take, and you achieve very similar scenario. So from the start, let's look at a couple more lines. Knight to c3, f5, your new favorite gambit. And after pawn takes, knight f6, bishop to c4, you attack it immediately. Bishop to b3, you attack the knight. And after queen to e2, bishop to e7, unpinning it. Earlier we went through knight g5. What happens after knight to h4? Still protecting the pawn. Similar scenario to before, not that similar, but still. Knight to d4 comes. Now the queen will have to move. Queen to e3 seems like a possibility, but now we take the bishop pair. Pawn takes back, and now d4 wins a piece for black. And in this position, after queen goes back to d1 instead of queen e3, still we take this bishop, pawn takes back, and now d4, very strong move. The knight will have two options here at this point that we're going to be looking at, knight e2 or knight to b1. With knight a4, you just play b5. Knight b5 gives a similar scenario to before. The game just gets worse and worse. You've seen pretty much what to do. So let's look at knight to e2. Black plays g5. Okay, you've seen this type of move. And the knight is trapped, so taking en passant is the only way to go. And now black ignores that and plays knight to g4 with an attack straight away on the knight in h4. g7 doesn't do anything, you just play rook to g8, you still have an attack on the knight is trapped, so the only way to go now is to defend it. But black simply takes it, pawn takes back, and now queen to f6, threatening mate in f2, and there's no way to come back from this. Yeah, maybe white will be able to play the best moves and not get checkmated, but the game is ridiculous. Rook to f1 is met by knight to h2 with an attack on the rook, and then when the rook moves you have knight to f3 checkmate, so that means white is going to give up a lot of material. We also have the infiltration of the bishop, the rook in g7. Look how useless the white pieces are in the back rank. So in this position earlier we went through pawn going to g7. Even if white plays h3 kicking away our knight straight away, we just play knight f2, and that's the best option we've got with attacking the queen. So that means white has to take this, but then you just castle and the game is completely over. You're going to take in h4 with a threat of playing bishop f2. The queen is infiltrating as well, so you take it from there. In this position, after knight f2, winning the opponent queen or forcing white to take the knight. If white tries to counterattack like g7, simply play rook to g8, and now the king has to take. But the funny thing is that in this type of move, by playing g7, the white player has prevented us now from castling and coming with check, which would have been absolutely ideal. Okay, now we just take the knight with a check, and after g3, can the white player manage to find a way to save the king for the moment? Queen to f6, check, and after the king moves, also because you were going to go to f3 with the queen if the king had picked this light square, and also the rook would like to play to f1. Now just black very quietly just plays rook takes g7, giving up the bishop. Boom! We never stop sacrificing. See what happens if, for example, white takes. Look how strong the attack is for the black player. Rook to g2. Boom again. The idea is queen f2 mate. Rook f1 is met with queen to h4. It's a massacre. Checkmate is coming very soon. One more recap. Okay, f5, pawn takes. Knight f6 and bishop c4, d5. Bishop moves, e4, queen e2, bishop e7, unpinning. And now, as mentioned, we're going to go through the variation of knight to h4. Okay, we play knight d4, and we've seen what happens after queen e3. Okay, queen d1 was the only way. Knight takes, bishop, pawn takes back, and now d4. Earlier we went through knight e2. What happens after knight b1? I mean, the game is already a joke, but let's just conclude by showing how to take it from here. d3 is the thematic move in this position. And after white castles, g5. En passant, only wait not to get the knight trapped. Pawn takes back. This is much worse than the before even. For example, knight takes pawn, it's not possible. Rook to h6, attack the knight. You don't have to worry about the attack of the Luxor bishop because he's just unable to. Knight takes bishop. Okay, simply take back with the queen. Position is evaluated around -4. Because look, the knight and the bishop will both be aiming at g4. White can never get rid of that attack. Queen to d6, queen e5 are possible moves. Black can castle alongside and get both rooks on the h-file. Black right now is threatening to play queen h7 with a winning move. h3 is not possible because he can sacrifice the bishop. Literally everything wins. So let's go back a couple of moves. In this position, what happens after g3? Okay, you exploit the weakness with bishop to g4, attacking the queen. Two moves we're going to look at. One of them is queen to e1. Okay, now sacrifice the rook for the knight. Boom. Pawn takes back, and now bishop to f3. Locks the king in like a man who has devoted his life to crime. Queen e3, even playing best moves doesn't help. Knight to g4 attacks the queen, and after queen to f4, bishop to d6 ends the game. There are no checks, nothing they make be able to make a checkmate in an h2, so white is forced to sacrifice a lot of material. And in this position, even if instead of queen e1 white plays f3, it doesn't really help. Queen d4 check, and after rook f2, bishop to c5, finalizing the attack on the rook. Queen to e1 protecting more, while g5 attacking the knight. Knight to g6 looks like it's a good move because it's attacking the rook whilst the pawn is attacking the bishop. But now we just simply swap everything. Queen takes, bishop takes, king takes, and surprisingly now pawn takes f3, completely ignoring the rook being attacked by the knight. Knight takes rook, okay, doesn't matter. Knight e4 check, and after king to g1, bishop to h3, threatening an unstoppable f2. Magnificent move.